you want to believe that what they're saying is going to be followed. Like this time it's going to be different.
Do you? Or because I think perhaps I would say initially maybe you do, but then at another point you would just rather them
just change
or just be straight up and tell you the truth.
Yeah.
Don't tell me more fluff.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want to hear
that.
Cut
the BS.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dale.
David.
Good afternoon. Good morning. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. It's been a bit of a cluster here with our...
Yeah. There was a fly that would...
There was a fly
that Dale
would not die.
Yeah. Dale can't stand flies.
I can't.
Isn't there like a movie? I think it's Rowan Atkinson. There's like a bee movie. I haven't watched it. But the whole movie is about this bee that he's trying to kill.
I don't know.
He just can't stand it.
Honestly, I think...
So your movie would be like The Fly.
Okay, so full disclosure, I think where it got so bad for me, or rather part of the reason that I don't like it. So when I lived in Africa, like where I lived in the particular village I was in, the flies were so bad because people hadn't redug their chows in such a long time, right? Like, and
they hadn't redug
because they had pit toilets.
Oh yeah. So in rural Africa, there's the plumbing is you just dig a big hole in the ground,
and if you don't like redig, like a lot of times when you go to the bathroom, like it's like
the flies swarm.
They swarm and they come up to meet you, and it's one of the most. It's just not the most inviting experience.
Luxurious,
right? But I think that
so that's where it started.
Well, and it wasn't just that. It was just that like anytime you're walking around the village, it's like you have like 20 or 30 flies just hovering on you.
Yeah,
and that was so irritating. But you had to just learn to be okay with it.
Mm-hmm. Was it a pretty warm climate where you were?
Yeah.
Yeah, that explains it.
I mean, 100%.
So if anything, you should have got used to the flies.
I should have, but I think the nature of it was that it became so marred in my mind that I couldn't place a recorrective experience around it. Now, don't get me wrong, there was good things, but then I also had a bot fly on my toe. You're familiar with those? Like they call it a funza.
The ones that the thing grows, the larva grows in your skin.
Yeah.
I had that too when I was a kid.
Yeah.
On my armpit.
Oh,
my parents. So yeah, whoever's listening, if you don't know what you're talking about, it's like it's super nasty. When you think about it,
be careful looking it up.
So yeah, so basically the flies will lay eggs in. Well, for me, the fly laid an egg in my clothes, and then the egg implanted in my armpit as a kid, and my parents thought it was like a boil. And so there's a way they treat boils, like you kind of like wait for it to ripen.
Yeah.
But they were actually feeding this larva, and we went to the doctor to take it out, and he didn't tell us what it was. He was just like, yeah, let me take a look. So he like pulls it out, he squeezes it out, and then it's like, yeah, and then she's like, look, it's moving.
Oh my god!
You see this like lava moving? I'm like, that thing was in me.
I remember for me, I saw this thing. I didn't even notice it was on my big toe, and it was just like growing, like periodically on my big toe. And I was like, "How is that? What's happening?" Like this, just a spot. I thought it was like a blister or something. It was just growing on my toe. And one day, I was sitting in. I think we were traveling from Tanzania back to Zambia. I'm pretty sure I was in the vehicle, and I decided to just try to push on it a little bit, and I did, and literally like eggs just popped out of it. It was like, boom! Like it was just wild. It was so awful.
What are you talking about?
It was so
eggs.
Awful. Yeah, because it hadn't it hadn't hatched yet. So it was like,
gosh,
yeah,
ouch, that hurt?
No, not at all.
Okay,
I was just like, whoa,
yeah, man. Well, guys,
cheers.
Trust me, I'm from Kenya. This doesn't usually happen. It doesn't usually happen. but sometimes it happens. It doesn't usually happen. So there's lots more to look forward to traveling. You enjoyed your experience, right? Despite your bot flies.
I did. So I think
you were also roughing it. Your experience was different.
My experience was different than many.
Yeah, you were like out in the boonies.
And then not only that, like I didn't subject I was not very smart in certain instances, and like
almost died of malaria at some point.
I don't know that it was necessarily the malaria, or rather like I got parasitic amoebas.
Oh yeah.
And those were really bad.
Right.
And I had them for a long time.
You drank like dirty water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now I didn't know where the water was coming from. And I was up on top. I was putting a roof like in a rural school, and I saw this pipe coming up out of the ground. So I made the assumption, bad idea, that okay, maybe it was drinking water.
You're super thirsty.
I was super thirsty. It was like 100 degrees. Went down, drank the water, and then I get back on the roof and I see the locals like washing their feet in this water, and I was like,
ugh.
Hey, where's that water coming from? I asked somebody, and he's like, oh, it's the pond.
Oh no.
And the pond had dead fish in it.
Oh no.
I remember going to the pond and seeing, I was like, is that water really dirty? And like there was nothing living in it. And it was like, oh,
stale, dead pond.
It was
gulped that water out, man.
I drank a ton of it.
Yeah.
And literally just destroyed my insides.
Did you say you were like hallucinating and stuff?
It was so bad. It progressively got worse, right? Because the amoebas, like, they like to make their home in you, and they're another thing that it's one of the most surreal experiences, because I've never experienced something to where it's like you have to try to appease it inside of your body. Like I got fevers, right? Amoebas don't like to be cold, so if I tried to take like a cool shower to break my fever or lower it, they would react. And they would start like eating,
like attacking
my intestines more, and it was so painful. And so I'd have to like keep the water hot, like if I was taking a shower. It was so uncomfortable.
That's wild.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. So guys, this is avoidable.
That can happen.
Growing up, I was told never drink any water that's not been boiled.
Smart.
So we learn how to we learn how to manage.
Yeah.
So. Unless it's like bottled and like there's a seal on the bottle.
Yeah.
So that's how we do it.
Smart.
Yeah.
Right.
So anyway, that was a little story time.
Yeah.
A little intro story time.
The one place I really wished I had gone was Malawi. Like Malawi.
Interesting.
I never got to go to Malawi. I thought I heard it was really beautiful.
Yeah.
Did you ever go
Kenya's beautiful.
I hear Kenya's beautiful.
I've been to Malawi. I haven't been to Lake Malawi, but I've been to Malawi. And I've heard good stuff about Lake Malawi.
Yeah.
Yeah. Malawi's a good country.
One day. I think one of the problems too is like at the time, the girl who I was dating, who's now my wife, like she was in Thailand. And I would get these letters every few months, and she's like telling me all these beautiful things that they're doing, and like how they're riding elephants, and like
the mangoes
and like going to the night markets, and like all these nice like comparative luxuries that they have.
Right, like beautiful. They have like
this water festival, and like I'm like frying in my grass thatch hut, and like I have amoebas eating my insides.
Yeah.
It was not ideal. But that was self-inflicted. I mean, it was. I had some really awesome experiences too, but not the same as hers.
No.
She got to go to like one of the top 5 beaches in the world for like vacationing, like Phi Phi Islands, like has all these cool scuba diving pictures from there, and I'm like, that's great.
Wow. You didn't even have a vacation.
That's great. I had a tarantula in my Shima this morning. Thank you.
I love it. Well, you have some fun stories to tell. But Del, so thank you for sharing that story.
Anytime. I got
guys. If you're ever considering traveling to Africa, talk to me. Don't talk to Dale. There's much more in store.
If you want worst case scenario, you can talk to me.
Yeah,
but I'm still here.
And then we can give you malaria pills and all that.
Yeah, that's true. So, hey, methylene blue. It was actually used to treat malaria way back in the day.
Get out. Yeah. We just talked about that the other day on the pod.
Oh, yeah, so it was actually one of the one of the first ones because it acts as an antiparasitic, evidently. So,
oh man, very good to know. I
now
didn't know that.
they came up with more effective ones, but it's
Yeah.
certainly one that functioned. Yeah.
Good to know.
Yeah, interesting.
So, oh, all right.
So
Cool.
you were saying
Yeah.
you were at it. You and Callie.
Yeah. So Callie and I sometimes
Callie's your wife.
Callie's my
Yeah.
wife. Yes. And so we get invited to speak on relationships to like young adult groups. And this past weekend we were speaking to a group, and we always have like Q&A sessions because that always comes up with relationships. And I kind of wanted to launch our conversation from a question that I got asked. And it was a young lady, and she asked that. So basically, it appears was talking to someone, has been talking to someone, has been dating someone. I don't know the context, but she asked, like, what if your significant other is dealing with an addiction? And in this case, it was a pornography addiction. But I think it applies to other issues or habits that might be destructive or things you don't like. What if they're dealing with an addiction that you do not approve of?
Okay.
How do you know whether to be patient and stay with them, hoping that things will change, things will get better? Or when do you draw the line and say, sorry, this is not for me?
What did you say?
What did I say?
Yeah.
Well, I was like, Callie, what do you think? No, yeah. So I said, good question.
Okay. Okay.
Right. As a good question. And what I started off by saying was, it's important to understand that it's one thing to have a problem or to experience a problem, like to experience an addiction. It's another thing to have that problem and submit yourself to a process of change.
Sure.
The first thing you need to determine is whether this person is submitted to a process of change and whether you are okay with that process that they have chosen to change and to grow. And at what point will you say, okay, you've been in this process of change, but the results, something's not adding up.
You're not changing.
Yeah, you're not changing, essentially. Yeah. So you need to decide what that is for you. But someone being in a process of change means that there's likely not going to be immediate change. But the trajectory is hopeful. The trajectory is that, okay, the person is not going to deal with this addiction as much. Maybe their moments of relapse are less. And we can talk more in detail about what that process of change might look like. But basically, I was like, listen, people go through these things and they're in their relationships and they get through it. Like, people recover. Like, you never tell people in recovery, like, hey, you need to break up with your significant other in order to recover. In fact,
some people do.
Some people do. Some people say that?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'd love to hear more.
Sorry. Keep going.
I'd love to hear from you about that.
Yeah.
But there is a lot, like the Gottmans. We've talked about the Gottmans. They did 40 years of research on relationships, and they actually recommend couples therapy to help with addiction recovery.
Yeah.
And so your relationship can actually be a conduit for you to grow and to change your behaviors. So, but the big question is, are you submitted to a process of change? Yeah. And I kind of left it at that.
Yeah. No,
those details
I think
that's
I think it's a great place to leave it, because I think the first thing that came to mind for me when you said that, it sounds like she had stated the question, or stated that there's an addiction that you don't approve of. Right. Well, I guess the curiosity for me would be, well, do they approve of it? right?
Good
Like,
question.
is this something that became a problem because you have a problem with it?
Yeah.
Or is a problem because they have been addressing it and it's not addressed to the full capacity that they would desire? And that's why it's a problem. So I think those are two very different problems.
Yeah.
One is something that, okay, this is because I would argue too that if this became a problem because my spouse or partner has a problem with it, it's very unlikely that I'm going to change it in actuality. It just is. I can't tell you how many times I've seen that.
That the person with the issue is not willing to either see it as an issue or willing to change.
They may say, there may be talk.
Like, yeah, I need to drink less. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Talk is cheap. It's not expensive. There's not a whole lot of buy-in. You don't have a whole lot of skin in the game at that point. But when it's something that you desire, that you've brought up, right? And you've, say, brought up with your partner or spouse, and it's like, hey, so there's this thing here, and it's something that I'm working on addressing, and I'm in some phases with this, and this is a process that I go through with this. Yeah, they may not like it either, but you don't either, right? And that's why you're bringing it up, because you would desire that there still be a functioning, healthy relationship and a process here that can continue to grow in spite of this. And so that's where I would say that that part particularly matters.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is, I think even before the change process is, does the other person want to change?
How do they see it? How do they evaluate what's happening and what's going on? Did it only become a problem because, oh, well, my partner doesn't like it, that's the only reason it's a problem? And is that how they view it?
So if I was not in the picture, if the partner was not in the picture, would you just maintain this habit, maintain this behavior?
Or if your partner suddenly said, hey, you know what, it's okay. How would you view that? Would you be like, all right, okay.
That's a great point.
Because then does that draw you closer? Because this is really, I think, what we've talked about values a lot. But I think ultimately it is a values question. Because it's like, all right, what things inherently draw me closer to the relationship that I would desire, to the life that I would desire? What feeds my soul effectively? How do I feel better as a human being? And what types of things do I engage in that are enriching? And what does not? And most of the time, I would say people struggle to be honest with that response. They're not always honest with themselves about the things that do feed them and the things that don't actually. However, then you also go into this other place of, okay, let's say they do address something and now it's like, okay, well, I have a bad habit. Right? That's a whole nother piece now. I think now we get into, all right, well, how do we alter this habit?
Yeah.
I can go more into that.
Into the change process?
Yeah.
Okay. So before we get there,
yeah.
You said something earlier, talk is cheap. Because that's a big one. Because talk is cheap, but talk is also, the reason why we have to say talk is cheap is because it's very easy for us to want to believe the talk.
Yeah.
Right? If somebody says, man, yeah, like, I'm really sorry I did it again. Like, I want to be better this time. Like, I'm committed to change. Like, I'm trying. I'm and you hear it a lot. And the person if you're hearing this from your partner who you want to change, and they seem to be, sorry, apologetic, they want to change, you want to believe that because you want the best for them and you don't want to discourage what they're saying. And so you're trying to hold on to that hope. Like, yeah, I guess it seems like they want to change. They're saying they're sorry. They're saying they want to be better. Why are you smiling like
Sorry.
that? Why are you smiling like that?
I think,
But talk is cheap. That's the
yeah,
thing.
I think
Talk is
that's
cheap.
at the end of the day, that's the real thing, in that, like, it, to some degree, what we do matters, or rather, what we say matters infinitely more if it aligns with what we do.
Hmm.
And even at some point, it's like, I would wager that we have to be able to articulate, even at some level, like, okay, I recognize I do something that I don't actually desire in myself here. But I would suggest that on some level, there still needs to be some type of step or affirmative action towards movement in a direction when we feel as though we're not able to make changes that we want to. Mm-hmm. But I would say that a lot of that happen. And what I'm referring to is, okay, so what about the instances when people are like, well, I tried to change and I can't do it.
Yeah.
Right. How often do you hear that?
Oh, yeah. I did my best.
Yeah. Did my best.
Yeah.
That didn't take too long.
So now what?
Yeah. So I think most often that's not true.
What do you mean?
When someone says,
how do we tell?
I did my best.
Yeah. So how do we? It's hard to argue against that, though.
Well, that's why it's stated.
Yeah. Exactly. Right? Exactly.
That's why it's stated.
That's why it's stated.
What are you supposed to say to that?
Yeah. Oh no, you didn't.
But no, and I would say that actually no, that is what you're supposed to say to that.
Yeah.
But this is where, like, most people will not go there to say, well, no, I don't actually believe that you did do your best.
Yeah.
Right. Because now we're really pressing the point home, and I would say largely that is a very confrontational thing to say, because now it's like, no, you're putting the impetus back on that person, and it's like, okay, well, I guess you just don't believe me, so we're at an impasse here. Right. But I think part of that, I think what I'm trying to get to here is, like, most often, really the person it matters to the most is ourselves. If I say, okay, I did my best, that's effectively, it's not even true. Right. And the reason it's not true is because if we're saying best, and this gets back to some of our earlier episodes on, like, what perfection is, right?
Yeah, like, what does best mean?
Yeah, what does best actually mean? Like, the very best I could do, I don't even know what that looks like, one.
Yeah, it's for hard. How do you define that?
Yeah, and so for me to automatically say, well, this was the very best absolute I could do, it's just a bold-faced lie. Because literally, I'm saying, like, okay, I did now, if I said, this is all I know how to do right now, that's more accurate. That may be true.
This is all that I know how to do right now.
Yeah, that may be true.
Yeah, I like that.
But don't say you did your best.
Yeah, because when you say I did your best, there's a certain finality to it.
Yes, like, I can do no more.
Yeah, and I have no capacity to grow. Yeah, I have no capacity to
decrediting yourself.
Yeah, right. Because your best can't. Because when you say this is all that I can do right now, leaves room for there's still room for me to grow so that I can still do more and do better.
Yeah.
I have that capacity to change and to grow.
Yes. And I think that's I think it's hugely important in any type of change, whether we're talking about addiction or not. Any other thoughts there?
Talk is cheap.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's big, man. Like, the talk is, and people, unfortunately, people who deal with addictive behaviors, they know how to talk. They know how to talk. That's part of it. That's part of the cycle.
They have to talk to themselves a lot.
Yeah.
to justify what it is that they're doing. So there's a constant entourage in their mind.
Yeah. Right.
Until they figured out how to qualm it.
Yeah. Exactly. And so it's, especially as a loved one, it's easy to want to believe them. But knowing that,
is it?
It's you want to believe that. You want to believe that what they're saying is going to be followed. Like this time it's going to be different.
Do you? Or because I think perhaps I would say initially maybe you do, but then at another point you would just rather them
just change
or just be straight up and tell you the truth.
Yeah.
Don't tell me more fluff.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want to
cut
hear
the
that.
BS.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think it's one thing to say, hey, I tried, I could have done all this and I tried to do that and I tried to do this. And it's like, no, just tell me, hey, I didn't do what I was supposed to do.
Own it.
I would argue for me, at least I have respect for that because it's showing some level of insight to the fact that you see it. But it's even more disturbing when you try to paint this picture, the same picture again.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I did like, what? Come again?
Yeah.
And I would argue that's where most people, like, when we say like write people off or like they just don't know, like people will no longer associate with individuals at a certain point because they stop expecting anything different than what they've seen. And it's much easier to be able to say, okay, look, at bare minimum, I can respect what you're saying and see that, yeah, no, you can own that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think even for myself, right? Like, so if I have something that I was supposed to do and I didn't do it, to some level, okay, relevant excuses may be appropriate. But what's more appropriate, I think, for myself is, and for me personally, if I can just simply own that I should have done this and I didn't. That's it.
Yeah. Because that's the reality.
That's the reality.
Yeah.
That's the hard pill to swallow.
Yeah.
But I have the self-respect for me now that, hey, I recognize that. Okay.
Yeah. It's that I'm reminded of that. There's a parable that Jesus taught of two brothers that a father sent out to work. And he asked him one son is like, hey, will you go do this, go out and do this work for me? And the son was like, yes, I'll do it. But he didn't do it. And then the other son's like, no, I'm not going to do it. But then later on, he changed his mind and came. And he said that second son is better off.
Yeah.
Than the son who said, yes, I'll do it, but didn't do it. I think there's some parallels there.
100%.
Like, just own it. If you're not gonna
do it,
just say no.
Don't have any pretenses here.
Yeah.
I think we come, because I think if we're looking at addiction as a whole, or rather say it from a bird's eye view, because to some level there's some commonalities with some of these things. I would also argue that, hey, there's probably another episode that we can dive into that some addictions I also believe are different in how they manifest and how they're characterized. However, I think at a bird's eye view, to some level, one of the things that keeps us from being able to progress in a state, or rather that keeps individuals, is this idea that we have no self-respect or very little. And so it's very easy to get into an area of self-pity, right? That's a circular pattern around this notion that I wish I could do this better. I wish I did that better. And I don't like that I didn't do this. I didn't do that. That's not the same thing as owning it. That's self-deprecating on and commiserating with yourself in such a way. It's different for me to say, I should have done this. I didn't. Plain and simple. It wasn't anyone else's fault. There was no other pieces here. This is what I'm going to do now. Now, I guess before I move on, do you have any thoughts there with what I was saying?
No, I think that's an important distinction you're making. So the self-deprecating is different from owning it.
Yes.
And saying, I should have done it. This is what I didn't do. This is the action I now need to take.
Yes, because the idea is, and I would argue that the idea is that when I commiserate in a pool of self-pity, I'm essentially saying that I am hopeless, right? And helpless, right? I'm not able to bear the burden of honesty to myself. And I would say that's the key part. I'm not able to bear the burden of honesty to myself. When I am straightforward and direct with myself, I am inherently communicating to me that I am able to bear the burden of honesty and straightforward talking with me. I can carry that burden, and I can move with that burden, and I can do something about that burden. That's a very different type of communication.
Yeah. Right. It's true. Yeah. It's true. Yeah, I've seen that a lot in working with clients and in my own life as well. Is I realized that I got it confused. Like I thought like it's weird. So the more self-respect I had, the more I could own my mistakes. Like it's the most obvious is when I do something to hurt my wife or harm my wife. Like
Sure.
Yeah, something that hurts her. I said I would do this. I didn't do it.
Yeah. Yep.
And when I own it, it's good for everyone. Yeah, it's good for me. It's good for her. But then there's this thing in the back of your mind where it's like, I don't want to own it, because if I own it, then it's like makes it worse, and it's you know what I'm saying?
I think we have, and we talked about this a little while back. It's like, what would it say about us if we owned that imperfection?
Exactly.
Right.
And it's like if I own it, then it's like I'm telling my wife that I am that thing,
and we over-identify with this thing as opposed to a mistake, right? Yes, it was a mistake, but when we over-identify by fear. Because I think that's what we're talking about. It's like when I say, like when I'm hesitant to own something because I'm scared of what that would say about me if I owned it, right? Well, now I'm going further down this rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Right. Like I'm practicing avoidance out of fear.
Right. And that's the wonderful paradox, is that the less you identify with it, the more you can actually own it.
Yes. Well, and I would say like it identify to a point of functionality.
Yes.
Right. Like, and I might use the word like the less we take it on and personalize it.
Yes.
Right. Because we have, I think to a degree, like we have to identify with it as a mistake.
Yeah. That you did.
Yes. Right. Like, yep.
Yeah,
no,
like,
I'm totally
I'm
capable of this.
Yes.
Right. But it also doesn't adequately represent what I am desiring to facilitate for my future.
Yes, and there's more to me and more to what I can do than this mistake.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And so it allows you to, the way I viewed it is the less I own it, the less I'm being self-focused. Sorry, the less I own it, the more self-focused I am being.
Yes.
And I'm not really thinking about how it harmed the other person.
Yes.
I'm thinking just so dude, I'm like I can't face myself.
Yes.
Knowing that I did that.
Yes.
Versus the less I identify myself to that mistake, then I can focus more on the harm it actually caused to this person.
Yes.
Own it and try to rectify it.
Yes.
And we can move on.
Yes. And I think, frankly, in the therapeutic space, there's a quote that and now, granted, this is I would say that this is heavily predicated on when things are therapeutically appropriate. And by that I mean like, hey, when you have a relationship with someone, and I could translate this also to relationships we have with friends or relationships with you have with your spouse. If my wife didn't believe I was capable of something, so she just didn't ask it of me and then resentment built, I believe what that is the soft bigotry of low expectations.
So she's not bringing it up because really she doesn't believe you can change.
And then resents that same fact.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, that's what breeds contempt in relationships, which is like the #1 predictor of divorce and terrible things.
Yes. And so I think, that's an interesting thing. Now, I guess before I go on there, do you have any other?
No, good. Let's go there.
Okay.
So the process of change.
So I think, this brings us to the next point of the process of change, right? And one thing that I think people miss quite frequently, and this happens whenever somebody comes in and says, okay, I would like to break a habit. I have a bad habit. I drink too much or look at too much porn, right? Mm-hmm. I think it's interesting that we don't often adequately understand what it means to break a habit. Like, because if you think about habit, like what is a habit? Like the thing we think most of is like it's something we do repeatedly on a predictable basis in some way or in response to certain stimulus. But if you think about the word habit, right? The root word habit like translates back to the Latin word, and the Latin for this word, I looked it up because I couldn't, and I'm butchering how to pronounce this. I believe it's habere.
Okay.
Essentially, meaning to have, hold, or possess.
I wish we had someone Latin to correct your butcher.
In Latin. Yeah. Anyways, but the point is that effectively the same word habitat has its roots in the word habit.
So habit and habitat.
Habitat, yeah. So they're both basically synonymous with one another, right? So effectively, when we say, okay, I have a bad habit, what it is we're really saying is, I've created a bad environment. That's what we're saying. So if I say, well, I need to break this environment, that becomes infinitely more challenging, I believe. You're talking about an entire environment. So is it more effective to tear apart an environment? I mean, you need bulldozers, you need all types of stuff to really tear apart an environment, like, and just take it, level it to the ground. That's a lot of work. And arguably, it's impossible to a degree.
Okay.
So it would be more functional for us to say, okay, well, instead of removing this environment, what about we create a new environment? What about we move ourselves and grow ourselves within a different type of environment? Right?
A new habitat.
A new habitat. Right. And arguably, like if we're talking about just say the behavioristic style of thinking, and rather from a sheer cognitive perspective, like the most often metaphor or I would say the most frequent metaphor that's used is, okay, every time a habit is formed in your mind, you effectively have a neural pathway, right? Like Pavlov discovered this when we have Pavlov's dog. It's like, for those of you that don't know about Pavlov's dog, it's like, okay, the guy basically discovered, he would ring a bell, give a dog a treat, ring a bell, give a dog a treat. Eventually he would see that every time he rang the bell, the dog's mouth would start to water. Yeah. Your brain is no different.
Yeah. Right? And we have a new puppy, and we are Pavloving that dog.
Absolutely.
To obedience.
Yeah. And well, and that's the thing. Like, so that's a habitat you're creating that's working for your benefit and the dog's benefit. But I would say in many instances, we create poor habitats. And so, okay, how can we produce a good habitat for something to thrive in? And if we have something that exists, well, then that we don't like, actually, I would say that the better question is, all right, how can we create a new habitat? And I would argue that that's why many programs even came into existence. Like if you think about like say AA for Alcoholics Anonymous, and now there's over like 120 different 12-step groups. But effectively, it's because you're trying to address people, places, and things. Now, if you think of people, places, and things,
yeah,
that's part of your habitat.
Yes.
It's where you exist.
Yes.
And if we allow ourselves to alter some of those pieces, then conceivably we start to shift and create new pathways in our brain as a result of new habitats. The reality is you'll never get rid of your old pathway. If you wanted to at any point, your brain's going to know because it's highly efficient. It's highly efficient. It doesn't just erase things. It uses them less, right? But very seldom do we ever see any evidence of it erasing something completely, right? Forgetting how entirely. It's like if you've ever gone skiing or snowboarding or swimming, even for example, you haven't swam in, like if you haven't swam in 10 years, like if you jump in the water, what are you going to do?
You still know how to swim.
You still know how to swim.
Like ride a bike.
Your brain knows.
Your brain remembers, yeah.
It knows how to do that. Even if it didn't use that skill repeatedly, there's still some level of things that it decided, okay, we keep these pieces. These are important.
So creating a new habitat.
Exactly.
So yeah, I like that. That brings up a bunch of thoughts for me. So
yeah,
the first one is, whenever I speak to people when it comes to addiction, I always start with this idea of like, don't think of a pink elephant.
Who do we know that talked about that? Frankel.
Right? Going back to a boy, Viktor Frankl.
Paradoxical intent.
Yeah, right? It's like, don't think of a pink elephant. Don't think of it. You're thinking about it, right? By focusing our energies on not doing this behavior, you're actually reinforcing it, right? And it's almost like, to me, I see it in the language used of like trying to change the existing habitat instead of creating a new one.
Yeah. It's like you have to go clean up. Say like the argument is, well, I don't want to smell like chicken poop, but I need to go clean out a chicken house. And my goal is to not smell like chicken poop. Well, I'm going to achieve this by getting rid of all the chicken poop in this chicken house.
Yeah.
Oh, wait a second. How about we just don't go in? And now I'm talking about like if the goal is to not smell like chicken poop.
Yes.
Right.
If the goal is to not smell like chicken poop, what do we do? Don't
go in the chicken house.
Yeah.
Go tend a garden.
Yeah.
Work with lavender or roses or something like that. Like that scent's going to get on you, right?
Yeah.
So I think in that demonstration,
that's huge, right? That's huge because again, like understanding addiction, you realize that that's to not smell like chicken is the addiction, but there's so many surrounding factors that and that's part of when you work. At least when I work with people dealing with addiction, is like we're not going to talk about that. We're not going to talk about the addiction itself so much as more so like the habitat that you've created to allow that addiction to thrive.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And so that's, and I think that, in recovery, they also talk about like first order change and second order change. Right. So first order change is like, I'm not going to do it again. Like, going to put some software blocks on my lap, software blockers and you lock
that stuff always makes me laugh.
Really?
It just does.
Yeah.
Like, especially
app blockers.
Yeah. Especially when it pertains to like, I guess specifically like thinking about pornography, because I think in many cases, like, that is, it's not to say that it can't work, but I feel like you're reinforcing this notion of like, oh, I know I want this thing really bad, so I'm just going to try to do this thing so I can't get to it. Is that going to work? Actually,
Yeah, I'm this rabid dog. I just need
Exactly.
to chain myself.
Yeah, so now you're characterizing now you're characterizing yourself as this ravenous, insatiable beast with this,
Yeah.
unquenchable thirst,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I would say that more appropriately, probably the more effective thing to do is to say, all right, like what environment have I really created here? Yeah, maybe I am absorbed within technology too much. But maybe what I need to do instead is just, hey, like remove things that as a whole aren't going to help my environment. Right? Not try to pick and choose like how I like limit these things. Like it's like, no, again, I will, full disclosure, I don't think social media in any form is going to be helpful for those endeavors. So therefore it's like, I could reasonably say, it's probably not something I need to engage in. And I think more often than not, that stuff is deleterious to
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Now, but with that though, I think there's high functionality for us to be able to say, all right, like what kind of habitat do I want to create though? Actually answer that question.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. And that's the thing. If you're the partner of someone who's dealing with this, is noticing that simply them trying to eliminate and just stop and to chain themselves and download all the software app, that's not the process of change we're talking about. The process of change is creating these new habitats, right? There's a proverb that says, to the hungry soul, every bitter thing is sweet.
Ooh.
To the hungry soul, every bitter thing is sweet.
That's good.
Yeah. And it's this idea that why have we created an environment where this addiction, which would be the bitter thing, is the thing that satisfies your hunger? Like, why are we settling for this? Because we know that as much as in the moment that addiction relieves some sort of feeling that you have, it creates such harmful consequences for your life.
I would argue what happens actually is that your brain's telling you it's going to relieve a feeling, but there's actually no feeling it's actually going to relieve. What's happening is that it's reinforced neurochemically that, all right, there's a very desirable, you could say, rush that could be achieved from this thing.
Yeah.
Like a sugar.
Yeah.
Right. It's going to be highly desirable. It's going to be something that's sought after greatly and will provide us with something that feels very good.
Yeah.
It's candy.
It's candy. Yes.
Now, I would say that what happens with, obviously, and this is where I would say certain addictions are slightly different. And people within addiction medicine, I would argue, are going to disagree with me on this premise, because it's like, especially in today's day and age, there's a notion that, okay, all addictions, like as far as how they're hardwired in the brain, are the same. They work on the reward system of the brain, right? This is all the same. However, I think inherently there is a certain aspect of something that, like when you become chemically dependent on something, say for instance, like benzodiazepines, alcohol.
Yeah, like oxy.
Yeah, oxy is a benzodiazepine.
Oh, that's a benzo. Yeah.
And so I think that neurochemically has a little bit of a different twist. Now, there are certain similarities 100% in that, okay, there's these compulsions that we're going to have, right? Absolutely, to be able to address that and scratch that itch effectively.
Right. And the very tangible withdrawal.
Yes, the very tangible, palpable withdrawal. Like you could die, right? And now I would also say that when some people, and I think this is how this happens, I believe, is that like what is interesting still are some of these anomalies of people you talk to about. They're like, well, I didn't have a problem with alcohol. I drank for 20 years and then one day I just stopped. And I think two things probably happened there. Is that actually more than likely what happened is that, and because usually when I hear those stories, typically it has something to do with some type of environment shift. Typically there's a reason that they just decide to stop. And typically that process is also accompanied by shifting certain things in their environment, in their habitat.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd also argue that at some point, okay, their level of consumption decreased before this happened.
Mm-hmm.
So that, okay.
Yeah, it wasn't 2 bottles a day. It was like once a week.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it stopped.
Yeah. And they were just done.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But when they were just done, that being done was something that they had decided long before, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I guess circling back to this part about you'd mentioned like this girl with her partner that has this habit. And I think with scenarios like that, yeah, I fully agree that there needs to be some type of process that's understood as far as how this is taking place and how this looks. But I think that it's even more relevant for the individual to understand how they're approaching this themselves in order for it to be lasting.
Mm-hmm. Like the partner.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It's important to understand how they are approaching it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like,
what do you mean?
Well, just in the sense that like, do they understand where do they see themselves in this process, and what is it that they're trying to facilitate now? Mm-hmm. Why is it that they're doing what they're doing? Why do they want to stop? Mm-hmm. What do they want to start?
Mm-hmm. That's a big one. Yeah. Why do they want to stop? What do they want to start? Because that's again, I think it goes back to what C.S. Lewis said. It's not that our desires are too strong, is that they're too weak.
Yeah.
Like we're far too easily pleased.
Yeah, that's such a great point.
Right? It's like it's like we're like, and he uses imagery of a boy who's satisfied with building castles in the
mud.
slum, in the mud, when he can't imagine doing that at a beach by the seaside because he's never been there before.
And when he doesn't know what water is, so the ocean has no meaning.
Yeah, has no meaning to him. And it's like we're far too easily pleased.
Makes a great point.
Right? And so it's this idea of like, what is it that you want to start? What are these higher values, these higher areas of meaning that you want to pursue? That again, like once they feed you and feed your soul, it'll be harder once you've created that environment to feel the need to be satisfied with your addiction, because you're so satisfied with these other things, and you've created that environment to support that.
And I think that's really what creates lasting change that's facilitated well, because once that happens, like, and desire can be facilitated there, I think desire is the one thing that we can erase. So we could no longer desire that pathway. Right? I mentioned before, okay, like the neural pathway may never be erased. Mm-hmm. Right? Your brain may know how to go on that trip, like go utilize that mechanism. But I think desire can be changed.
Mm-hmm. Like I no longer want to partake.
Yeah, I no longer want to partake in this.
Yeah.
It does not sound pleasurable. Because I think desire is actually very different. And desire can be facilitated once we can really see and appreciate what this new habitat we are creating looks like. I mean, you can quite literally see the fruits from your labor.
Yeah. Right. And so you said something about like the stronger addictions. Is there, because I guess maybe somebody's thinking like, okay, how should I approach it with someone dealing with a much stronger?
Well, and I want to be careful with stronger addiction, because I think
how do you label it?
I guess I would just like with ones that are more like facilitated by chemical intervention.
Yeah.
Right.
Because
like
of
external
how it affects your biology.
Yeah, because of how it affects your biology, and like external chemical intervention is might be how I would articulate it, because inherently, like the habitat I created, let's say for instance around pornography, like,
Mhm.
okay, when someone views pornography and it experiences stimulation, there's a dopamine rush. It's estimated to be around like, 100, 200%, right? Of like excitatory response.
Mhm.
Now we don't actually, the trouble with this is
We
all
don't.
these estimations are based on neuroimaging,
Yeah.
which arguably is still off in its ability to actually evaluate what's happening. We just see that there's activity, but and yes, you couldn't. It's not. So some of them aren't only on neuroimaging. Some of them, like obviously, you can test blood. You can be able to look at a few different areas, but there's still a level of um, unknown in how
Mhm.
that data is interpreted as far as the tools that are used to measure things like this.
Extrapolation.
Yes, and how that data is extrapolated. But let's say, for example, it's true and that, okay, your dopamine rush, say from something like pornography or sex, is like 1 to 200%. Now, with something like opiates,
Mhm.
cocaine,
Mhm.
it shoots up anywhere between 5 and 800%,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It can go even higher into the thousands.
Right.
Right. So if that is true and those numbers are, even moderately accurate, then you have a very different stimulus here.
Yeah. We're
Like,
dealing
we're
with
dealing
a
with
different beast.
different beasts of different potency and potential. And for that reason, I would say that, okay, now they're also different beasts because arguably too, it's like in order to access that and to come in contact with it, the accessibility is inherently different. Right? If you think about, okay, pornography, for example, it's hugely highly accessible.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
within
It's on your
seconds.
phone.
Like
Yeah. Barely any
with
cost.
cocaine, like that's going to take a little bit of time usually.
Yeah.
Obviously, you could have huge stashes of it yourself,
Right.
but there's
You
still
need to buy it. You need to
yeah,
afford it. You need to
there's
find
still some pieces that have to fall into place
Yeah.
still in order for that to occur.
Mhm. Or pain meds. You need to diagnose.
Exactly.
Prescriber.
And so to some level, if we quite literally are in a separate space long enough, right, we could potentially be able to create a new habitat, perhaps fairly modestly. Now, there may be a few more intentional mental steps that we have to engage in order to do that with something like pornography or what we might call a behavioral addiction, because it has more, like I would say the front lines of that addiction are here.
In your mind.
Yes. And it's not to say that they're not there with things like benzodiazepines or alcohol.
Mhm.
It is to say though that the level to where that battle is fought and how pertinent that is in the current moment is at a different place, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Because there's some people who argue that process addictions or behavioral addictions are they're not real addictions.
Well, to
right? Like some
sure.
Yeah.
Well, it's honestly
like gambling,
yeah.
Sex addiction,
Sure.
but also eating disorders.
Sure.
Which insomnia is like one of the greatest killer, not insomnia. Anorexia.
Anorexia nervosa.
Anorexia, yeah, is one of, people die the most
Yeah.
from that. That's just like a food, that's a mind thing.
Now, I would say that, and this is where I think it's a little bit trickier, is I would argue that with a lot of them, the reason why they're different is that there's actually other co-occurring things that happen there.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's true.
It's not
There's
just
always something else.
Yeah, it's not just the addiction that's going on. The addiction is a symptom of a greater problem, right? Whereas with these other pieces, I would say that, okay, yeah, this problem is a very significant problem because the alcohol will kill you. The benzo will
alcohol
kill you.
itself.
Yes, right?
Yeah.
Yes, not eating will kill you, but it's not it's your thoughts, how they exist. That's the actual problem here, right? And one could argue that, okay, well, it's your thoughts around the alcohol or what have you. Yes, but also no.
It's no, yeah.
And so I think there is some difference. There's some nuance, but I think at the end of the day, tying this back all together, the things that I believe are most pertinent for people in order to facilitate those types of changes are how well they address the question of what is it that they're wanting to start and create. What type of environment is that? what does that look like?
Yeah. And more often than not, creating that environment is a process that will involve you reaching out for help, reaching out for support as the person wanting to change. Because probably for most of the time, you've been trying to manage it on your own and it's not been working out very well, right? There's obviously an element of you taking ownership and submitting yourself to that process, but also realizing that I might need support. I might need to reach out to people maybe I have not reached out to, you know? And that's why we have all these recovery groups and people go to therapy or people, right? But it's this idea that and even sometimes that's for some people, that's what it is. It's this I want to do it by myself. I'm gonna do it by myself. I don't need anyone.
Yeah. So
You know what I'm saying?
I think it's an interesting parallel that's drawn and that's believed in that when we are alone, we like by doing this thing by myself, I will somehow antiquate this with being strong.
Yes.
But the only trouble with this is if that same equation involves lying to myself, I'm actually just becoming weaker. Whereas if in the process of saying that, okay, I need support from other people, having support from other people is valuable. Me also being vulnerable with people is valuable. It's valuable because that actually makes me stronger because that thing is difficult. That is actually the hard thing to do. I don't get stronger by doing easy things.
Right. Because reaching out is hard. Yeah.
Because it involves me being able to take, to some level, a searching and fearless moral inventory.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because I've even heard people say like, dude, is this thing like, why can addiction be like getting a shot and I'm healed? I never have to think about it. Like a vaccine, like
Sure.
I'm healed. Like take a medicine, you're done. Versus I feel like by the very nature of reaching out for help, again, it's that fear that says something about me.
Sure.
That I have to submit to this process of change.
Well, and I think the reason why why reaching out is often antiquated with that is because part of disclosing and sharing something with another person involves you taking a more careful look at yourself. Right. I've said it before, like we're masters of our own self-deceit. Right. So any way in which we can more adequately address how we lie to ourselves, the better.
Yeah.
That may not always look like saying, okay, I'm going to a 12-step group. I'm going to just share all my dirty laundry like every day. Like that's what's going to happen. That's what's going to be. That doesn't mean that.
No.
That doesn't mean that.
Yeah.
But what it may mean is being able to be honest with another human being about the nature of how you struggle so that you can also provide language about what it is that you desire and how you desire to facilitate that process of change for yourself.
And maybe just add one quick thing to that too, is I've noticed some people will agree to reaching out, but they then want to do it on their own terms. Right?
Well, and I think that's also because they were pushed to reaching out not on their terms.
Yeah.
And they didn't want it themselves. It's interesting because I think this kind of comes into play about people having to hit their bottoms.
Yeah, rock bottom.
Yeah. And what's interesting about this is that rock bottom is often used as a notion to say that, well, rock bottom is automatically has to be this bad place to where it's like, well, I hit my bottom, like I was almost dead now. Right. And that's why it was valuable, because I had to have this terrible experience. But I would say that the thing that makes rock bottom meaningful is that this was the moment that I could more clearly see the habitat and place that I really desire with all my heart. Right? Mm-hmm. That's the time when I really begin to see how badly I really want this other experience. It's not the fact that you have to lose everything that you have.
Right.
Now I think we antiquate that because well, how else will you really see your desire for something
when you're gonna exactly.
Well, no, it actually isn't. I don't think those two are mutually exclusive. I think what happens, because somebody could lose everything they have and they still keep doing this thing, right? And you're pulling your hair out. You're like, why is that? Yeah. But I think it's more about an experience being able to inform somebody about what it is they deeply desire. That could be any experience. It could be any moment, theoretically speaking, or a series of moments. Mm-hmm. I would argue it happens more through a series of moments. It's like hearing about, I'm automatically more apt to believe instances of change that happen slowly over time than I am of
instantaneous.
Ooh. It's not to say I don't believe in divine intervention. I just think that's very rare.
Yeah.
I think
I think we over what's it called? Glamorize that instantaneous. Like we all want that. We're like, man, I wish I could just be so overwhelmed that I don't need this thing anymore. And I'm changed. But that's not.
Because we're lazy and we don't want to work.
Well, okay. Yeah.
I'm guilty of that as well.
Same. I mean, 100%. Yeah. 100%, man. I just wish I had the motivation to just start this business, do this thing, right? But it's and I think what you said is powerful because we realize that when we deeply desire and we submit to that process of change, when we reach out for help, we are open to guidance. Instead of wanting to do it on our own terms, we're like, listen, I'm willing to take the best path necessary for me to achieve this new habitat. Whether it comes from my wisdom, unlikely, right? But from someone else, I'm willing to be guided and to submit to a structure and a process that's necessary for me to get to this place. No matter how maybe humiliating or humbling it might seem, because I just want to be better, man.
That was some good stuff.
Yeah, that was addiction, man. You could
we can
talk about addiction. I feel like we could talk. Yeah. Awesome.
Until the next one.
Until next time.